Hello everyone, it's Channin here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we are going to create this sweet card featuring the awesome Summer Cabin honey cuts. We're going to start by making the A-frame cabin. So I'm going to grab all the dies that are needed for that cabin, including the two kind of obvious A-frame ones, and then a die for the windows and a die for the door. I'm just going to die cut them out of some white cardstock, and then we are going to ink blend as well as Copic color to add details and color to these die cuts. I'm going to start by ink blending the A-frame base with Broken China Distress ink. After I get that nice blue over the whole base, I'm then going to take a Copic marker. I'm using BG15 and just go along the lines that the die embosses on the cardstock, and once I finish adding those lines, we'll then move on to some of the other elements that are layered on top of that base. First, starting with this kind of foundation, I'm just going to take a gray Copic marker and just quickly color that. Then we'll set that aside. For the next element, it's going to be the roof, and I'm going to use a nice teal kind of color to kind of match that Broken China, but in a darker tone. Then we'll move on to the chimney and the door. I've picked out kind of like a terracotta orange. I'm going to quickly color that door and then the little chimney. It's very teeny tiny, and so I found that tweezers kind of help to kind of hold it in place while I color that. Of course, if these things are too tiny and you don't want to color them, you could of course just die cut them out of colored cardstock instead. Now I'm going to move on to kind of all the frames for the windows and the door, and I'm just going to color them in a really dark brown. This is E47, and once I finish coloring these frames, we will actually have all the parts colored and ready to layer on top of that A-frame base for our cute little cabin. So here I've finished up those parts. I'm going to pull them all down on screen here, and then we'll zoom in, and now we'll start to just adhere them on top. Again, they're very small, so tweezers are very helpful for this. I'm just going to use the Honeybee Stamps glue to stick them all down, and it comes along pretty quickly, and it doesn't really matter the order that you glue them on. You can glue them any order. You can start with the roof, you can start with the frames, or the chimney. It really doesn't matter. They all fit together nicely. None of them need to be on top of one or the other. They only need to go on top of that base. Oh, except for that little door, that little frame is adhered on to the door first. And that's true for the second cabin as well. So all the little door frames get adhered on to the doors. Here I am finishing up by gluing those window frames on. We have two little kind of rectangle windows in at the kind of the bottom. And then the only thing we'll have left is our cute little door. And I just love the way this little cabin turned out. It's so sweet, and it has so much detail. All those layers really add to the overall look. And then of course all our Copic coloring really adds to it as well. Now we're going to move on to a second cabin. I'm going to grab all the parts for that. The base, the detail, and then some of the extra details like the chimney and the frames for the door and the windows. Went ahead and die cut that out of white cardstock. We're going to start by ink blending the base for this cabin with walnut stain. We're going to make this one look kind of like a log cabin. Once we finish ink blending that, just like we did on the A-frame, we're going to take a Copic marker and we're going to add those lines. I have E37 here. I'm just going to go along all those little embossed lines that the die creates or adds to the cardstock, and that will just add a nice detail layer to that cabin. Really start to make it look like a log cabin. Now we're going to move on to coloring the door and some of these like side profile logs, I guess, or ends of the logs with a really light tan. Once I finish with that, I will grab a darker brown and just add a little dot for the handle on the door. Then we're going to move on to the roof and the frames. I've chose a really dark brown here. This is E49, and I'm just going to quickly color that roof and all of those window frames and even the door frame as well. And you can see here, once I finish one of the little die cuts, I'll kind of move it off to the side, and you can see it a little bit better in that white space on my scrap of cardstock. Okay, so now the frames are done. We're going to finish up with the kind of the foundation as well as the chimney. I'm using that terracotta kind of orange again. I just love this color. It's E08. And once we finish with that, we will have all our parts ready to put our little log cabin together. Just like the A-frame, it comes together pretty quickly and you don't have to worry about which order you put them on. Well, I will say I thought it worked out better when I finished with the side profile of the logs. They kind of overlap a little bit with the roof and the foundation. So I take that back. Those side profile ones are the ones I would put on last, which you'll see me do here in this footage. So I just finished the foundation and you can see those two little side profile pieces in the light tan. We'll add those last, and those kind of end up overlapping a little bit with the roof and the foundation, so it's kind of nice to do those last. And that will actually complete our little log cabin. So now we have both our cabins complete, but except for the backing behind them, because I want those windows to have like a yellow warm glow. So I'm going to take my little cabins, place them on some white cardstock, trace around them, and then cut that out. Then I will grab a Copic marker, a yellow Copic marker, and I'll quickly color kind of the areas where the windows are. You could even just color the whole thing, or even just use a piece of yellow cardstock instead. And after I get those colored, I just added some liquid glue to the backside of the cabins and just adhered them on top. And now we have this beautiful yellow warm glow behind those windows. Now moving on to some trees. I'm going to grab, there are 2 trees in this, when each tree has 2 dies to create it. I went ahead and die cut them out of white cardstock. I'm going to ink blend the trunks with walnut stain. This is the base for both the trees. Then I'll move on to the rustic wilderness and ink blend kind of the green top parts, but avoiding the trunks. And then I'll ink blend the detail layer for both the trees with that rustic wilderness green. Then for the smaller pine, I'm going to take a Copic marker and just kind of color in some of the embossed areas on that tree just to kind of highlight those details. And we'll be finished with the rustic wilderness pair of trees. Now we're going to make 2 more trees. So I die cut those trees again out of white cardstock. I'm going to start by ink blending walnut stain for the trunks. Then for the branches, I'm ink blending in peeled paint, so kind of more of an olivey green, just to kind of vary up our greens here. I think it makes the scene a little bit more interesting if the trees aren't all exactly the same green. Then again, and just like before, I'm going to take a Copic marker and color that smaller pine tree on those embossed areas just to add just to kind of bring forth or draw attention to those details that the die creates. Then I'll just glue the detail layers on top of the base, and then we will be done with all of our little die cuts for our scene. So we have our trees here. These are the peeled paint. Then we have our 2 ones that I glued off screen that were rustic wilderness. Now for our background, we're just going to use a piece of pattern paper from this awesome Adventure Awaits paper pad. This has some beautiful watercolored scenes that would work great, I think, for the cabins as well, but I chose this really pretty wood grain background. I thought it was nice and simple and wouldn't distract from those cabins. Then for our sentiment, I'm going to use the Mini Messages stamp set. I love this stamp set. I know I'm going to use this a ton. I'm going to stamp it onto some black cardstock, so I did ink it up in clear Watermark and embossing ink from Honeybee Stamps, dipped it into some white embossing powder, and then I'm going to heat set with my heat tool. Then I'll use the coordinating die. This is the Mini Messages banner die. These dies are so awesome. There are kind of straight cornered 90-degree corner ones, or rounded ones like this one, or even banner dies in that set, so I love the variety. I went ahead and die cut that out, and now we're going to kind of put this card together. I'm going to start by adhering that pattern paper to the front of an A2 top folding white card base. Then I'll arrange my little scene kind of in the upper third with my trees behind my 2 little cabins. I think they're so cute. This really makes me want to go camping or go into the woods. It's just such a really pretty scene. Once I have my scene arranged, I'll grab a piece of tape. This is kind of a low tack tape. You could use press and seal if you prefer. And I'm just going to hold all those die cuts together with that tape, flip it over, then use a little bit of liquid adhesive to adhere some of those trees to the back side of the houses, if it's in anywhere where they kind of overlap. And then we're on to foam tape. I'm going to add a ton of foam tape to the back side of those houses and trees just so they have a little bit more dimension and they're popped up away from the background. I think that just adds a nice little pretty shadow and makes everything neat and tidy. After I've removed the backing on the foam adhesive, I stuck it down and then carefully removed my tape to reveal my little scene. And then for our sentiment, I've already added a piece of foam adhesive to the back side, so I removed the backing, and now I'm going to stick it to my card front, and that will actually complete my little card. I love this sweet little scene. Those die cuts are amazing. Those summer cabin die cuts are so cool. There's so much detail in them, and I just love the way they turned out. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.